Whether you're new to Five Nights at Freddy's or a FNAF veteran, you might have noticed that Five Nights at Freddy's now is very different from how it was in the past. We've gone from point-and-click horror to now being fully immersed in VR or exploring a pizzaplex. Now, it's natural for a game to improve over time. As it gains more fans and makes more money, the budget for the game increases. But when you compare the positive reception that VR titles like Help Wanted 1 and 2 received with the mixed reception of Security Breach, any fan would wonder if the future Five Nights at Freddy's titles will be played with VR controllers rather than an Xbox or PlayStation 1. But before we dive too far into speculation, let's take a look at the facts surrounding this. In case you weren't aware, Scott Cawthon doesn't make the FNAF games by himself anymore. As shocking as that may be, games like Security Breach and Help Wanted require a large team of developers to execute something like this, and the company Scott chose to partner with was Steel Wool Studios. Now, looking at Steel Wool's website and their mission statement, you will notice this line. Because we believe virtual reality is on the edge of becoming a full-blown new entertainment medium, not a passing fad, our goal is to advance the state of VR with our skill. Suppose Steel Wool is serious about making games within virtual reality and it being the primary medium for games of the future. Why not use a super popular franchise like Five Nights at Freddy's as an industry leader for this? They could use the success of FNAF VR to convince other game studios who are dismissive of VR that the virtual reality gaming market indeed exists and is worth dabbling in. Now, in my conversations with others, a common question they ask is, do you think Scott Cawthon would allow them? And it's a fair question. Steel Wool can't do much if Scott just vetoes their every decision. However, what if Scott agrees with their mission statement? Scott probably did his research on the company he was partnering with and decided that their goals align with his own. Just scrolling down on the Steel Wool website will show some of the games that Steel Wool has released. And out of the 8 games shown, 6 of them are VR based. So if Five Nights at Freddy's was to make the switch to a mainly VR franchise, it seems like it could work out. They have a talented team of developers who could definitely carry out the plan if required. But before they make an important decision like that, the current Help Wanted games would have to be a success, right? Well, the answer to that question is actually very complex because Five Nights at Freddy's and mascot horror in general is super different from the gaming norm. You see, when a company like Activision or Bethesda publishes a game, they make the game and then try to sell people on purchasing what they've made. They want to convert your interest in the game into cash. But Five Nights at Freddy's scenario is unique. When a new Five Nights at Freddy's game is released, there's a sizable portion of fans who have no interest in buying the product, whether it's a digital or physical copy. Instead, they look to YouTube to watch their favorite content creators play it. That's why millions flock to channels like 8-Bit Ryan, Dawko, and FusionZgamer to watch their reactions and playthroughs. So, how does this affect VR titles? Well, Steel Wool knows that only a certain portion of the Fazbear fans will actually press the purchase button. Most likely, somewhere in Steel Wool Studios HQ, there's a graphic or a chart made to represent this. It's a vital component of selling anything from brooms, lawnmowers to video games. I guarantee you even now, Steel Wool is studying and taking notes as to why Help Wanted is succeeding and how to maintain that success. But what would they take note of in terms of Help Wanted? When Help Wanted was first announced, everyone was ecstatic. The fan favorite OG FNAF experiences were perfect for the VR setting. Especially since some of the fan base had become desensitized to the scares within the games, playing it in VR just felt logical. And not only was this move logical, but it was wildly successful. From the moment the game was released, FNAF fans fell in love with FNAF Help Wanted. Even the cynical critics raved about this game being the perfect match. The game was the #1 selling VR game on Steam for a reason, and not only did a great job of revitalizing the horror aspect of FNAF's past, but it also innovated with new experiences like vent repair and parts and service. And Help Wanted also mixed the perfect amount of a FNAF fan's favorite, Lord! Oh. Thanks, MatPat. Steel Wool was brilliant for using the audio tapes as a medium to tell the real story of what was going on, and the introduction of a personal favorite, Glitch Trap, was well executed. If there was something bad about Help Wanted, I haven't heard it, because everyone I have seen interact with this game has had a generally good time. I assume that because of Help Wanted's success, the DLC, Curse of Dreadbear, was released afterward. This Halloween-themed DLC was also wildly successful, and everyone seemed to have a great time with it. So, FNAF's first expedition into VR was a very successful one. In contrast to Help Wanted's unanimous success came Security Breach's controversial release. Now, I've made it clear on this channel through my videos and my live streams that I am not a big Security Breach fan. The best way to describe it would be that I am a unique Security Breach hater. You see, many in the FNAF community believe that if Security Breach had more time to develop, the game wouldn't have released in as poor of a state as it did. However, I disagree. I believe that security breach at its core is a flawed concept in a flawed game. Sure, if they had more time to make it, there may have been less poorly rendered signs, doors, and characters. But this isn't addressing the core issues within the game. Security breach strays way too far from the core of FNAF. Its failure in creating a threatening or suspenseful environment causes players to forget that there's even a threat. As a player, how am I supposed to be afraid of trash-eating Chica when I can see her from a mile away due to the giant neon fluorescent lights located throughout the Pizzaplex? Even the scary parts of this game, like the Moon Play Care sequence and the Glamrock Endo area, are just short experiences that tease us as to what this game could have been. And do not get me started on the storytelling within this game. With how poorly that was done, it made me question for a solid few months if Steel Wool even knew what they were doing. But I will stop there, because I could go on for hours. Because there's one very important thing that I want to highlight within Security Breach, and that's the game's DLC, Ruin. Ruin released just under 2 years after Security Breach's release date, and it instantly became the best part of the game. Where Security Breach left FNAF fans like me doubting Steel Wool's work, Ruin reminded us of what they could do. This DLC was not only better than the base game, but felt more direct and purposeful in its flow as a video game. And this wasn't a small DLC, this was an entirely free add-on of around 4 hours of gameplay. For context, the main Security Breach game took around 10 hours to beat, so if Ruin was amazing, why would there ever be a full switch to Five Nights at Freddy's in VR? Well, Ruin succeeded in delivering the experience we wanted. In Ruin, we got the scary environment, the scary jump scares, and the more direct nature of the DLC was exactly what we wanted. But Ruin's success was almost cheating in a way. And by that, I mean that Steel Wool could have just watched a few YouTube videos or just scrolled through Twitter and they could have figured out a way to make a good DLC. Now, I don't want to take credit away from Steel Wool for actually making and executing on these ideas. They went through the hard work of making it, not me. I'm just saying that Ruin didn't have to be built from the ground up like Security Breach, which was the inferior gaming experience of the two. So while an argument could be made that it's a sign in the right direction, another argument could be made that it is an exception and that Steel Wool may face a similar uphill battle when creating an entirely new experience like Security Breach was. But even as you argue in your head about Security Breach and Ruin, there's no doubt that the superior experience is none other than Steel Wool Studios' latest release, Help Wanted 2. When Help Wanted 2 was first announced, joy poured out from everywhere all over the internet. People were thrilled by the idea of more FNAF VR scares and were excited to see what kind of experience Steel Wool was cooking up. Once again, it highlights how well received Help Wanted was and also shows the faith that the community has in Steel Wool VR projects. So, now that Help Wanted 2 is out, how does everyone feel about it? Personally, I think Help Wanted 2 is Security Breach, but in VR. Where Security Breach has a fun and bright atmosphere with a few small scares in between, Help Wanted 2 has some of the same fun and bright experiences. Things like arts and crafts and food prep are fun breaks from the scares, but then you get into the sister location and endo games and you start to feel the horror come back. Security Breach's flaw was that the scary sections came and went. Once you beat the Glamrock Endo section, you were back to the bright and cheerful portion of the game. Meanwhile, Help Wanted 2 can balance it perfectly. If you want to get scared and feel the fear factor, you can play the scary levels. But if you want to enjoy some fun game modes that are just FNAF themed, you have that option. And that's what makes Help Wanted 1 and 2 better. You can choose and navigate your own experience, while in Security Breach, you kind of just throw yourself from one side of the Pizzaplex to the other, trying to get some higher level security passes. And in the same way that the gameplay was better, lore delivery was also much better than in Security Breach. Within Help Wanted 2, there isn't as much direct knowledge being thrown our way like in Security Breach, but its delivery was so much better. The reveal of taking off the Vanny Mask, the multiple endings, Mystic Hippo, and the Princess Quest ending were all very well done. In contrast to Security Breach, the lore presented to us felt like something Steel Wool was confident in. Furthermore, that makes me believe that the VR game format is something that Steel Wool themselves are more confident in. They may feel more comfortable and confident in their storytelling through a Help Wanted title rather than a game like Security Breach. And to add icing onto this speculation cake, like Help Wanted 1, this game was a top seller on Steam VR. So, is Steel Wool going all in on VR games? I have no idea. This video was merely my thoughts and speculation about virtual reality's role in the future of FNAF. On a serious note though, to those OG FNAF fans who are wondering what happened to the traditional FNAF, I do genuinely feel for you. Five Nights at Freddy's will continue to change, and while I'm willing to stick around for the ride, I understand that some of you may not be as interested. So, to the veterans of FNAF who are heading off into retirement, I salute you and thank you for your service. But to those of you who are sticking around, consider pressing that subscribe button, because there's a lot more FNAF content coming.